over the next 5 or 6 years, we expect to see production grow from less than 50,000 ounces to plus 600,000 ounces. Our NAV, based on the PEAs at $3,000 gold, was $5 billion. We're trading at maybe $1 billion.
Greetings and welcome to our Wealthion show. My name is Trey Reik, and we're here today with a gold mining executive I've had the pleasure of working with for over a decade. Richard Young currently serves as president and CEO of i-80 Gold, a Nevada-based gold mining company working to develop its operating mine and 4 development projects into a mid-tier producer status, ultimately all coming through the Lone Tree complex in Nevada. So, Richard, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Trey, thanks for having me again. Look forward to today's conversation.
Okay, now here comes the disclaimer part. I want to point out importantly that our conversation today should not be interpreted as a recommendation to purchase shares of i-80. We are simply introducing Richard and i-80 to the Wealthion audience as an instructive example of the type of company and management which have achieved proven and repeated success in the gold mining industry. So all information in my discussion with Richard should be received with our emphatic disclaimer that neither Richard and I are projecting future targets, results, or performance at i-80. We're simply introducing the type of gold mining company we at Wealthion feel it is appropriate for viewers to research and monitor in coming periods. So with that sweeping disclaimer, Richard, I think it would be most appropriate for you to introduce yourself to our audience with brief summaries of your experiences at Taranga and Argonaut, both of which I participated in successfully. Let's start with Taranga. Can you give us a brief sketch of your founding, development, and disposition of Taranga Gold?
So, Trey, maybe I'll go a step back because it's sort of pertinent to where we are today in i-80. So I actually started my career at Barrick Gold when they had 25 employees, and their signature asset was Goldstrike in Nevada. And I actually currently work with a number of people that I worked with at Goldstrike back in the early 90s. And so, again, I worked at Barrick for nearly a decade and a half, worked globally. And then after that, as you mentioned, Alan Hill, who actually built all of Barrick's mines over a 20-year period, he and I founded Taranga Gold. And what we loved about Taranga is not dissimilar to where we are today, in that, Taranga, we IPO'd in 2010, and they just started producing in Senegal. And, Alan would use the example of having the only gas station in town. That ultimately everything would come to us, which fortuitously it did. We made a couple acquisitions in Senegal that took it to, roughly about a 3 to 350,000 ounce producer at great cost at the mine in Senegal. And then we made some acquisitions, and we ultimately built that up to a mid-tier gold producer and merged that in with Endeavor to produce a new senior. And that was quite successful. And a lot of that group that was there for more than a decade at Taranga is here with us here at i-80. And I think they're a highly competent group, legal, finance, as well as technical. And then we moved over to Argonaut, and the chair of Argonaut was somebody that we had known for a long time. They were going through a build. It was over budget. And the CEO had to resign for health reasons, so I and our team stepped in. And look, ultimately, that was not as successful as we would have liked it to have been. Two issues. One, the geology didn't hold up the way we had thought coming in, as well as the mill performance was less than nameplate. But when you look at both of those, Trey, approaching i-80, first of all, it's an incredible group of past producing operations. We've got 14 million ounces of gold in measured, indicated, and inferred, and over 200 million ounces of silver. And, having worked globally, coming back to Nevada, it's the best jurisdiction to mine for gold for two reasons. The first is the geology, and the geologist would shoot me, but the truth is the geology is simpler in Nevada than it is in most other gold producing jurisdictions, given the disseminated nature. So once you understand the structures, the infill programs, you can largely convert one-to-one resource to reserve. The other is the people. There's just no other jurisdiction other than maybe Western Australia or Quebec in Canada here, where you've got such an incredible, well-trained workforce, suppliers, contractors. The execution risk in Nevada is lower than really it is anywhere in the globe. And, it's just a pleasure to have an opportunity to create the type of value that we believe we can create as we execute on the development plan that we laid out a year ago.
Terrific. So you covered my next two questions, which I now don't need to ask, but Argonaut, which I was involved with, I want to tell viewers, was a bit of a different situation from Taranga in that it was, there were some issues in terms of capital, et cetera, that needed to be addressed. And I think you've since adopted a moniker as a fixer. And so therefore, like it or not, can you talk about sort of how you got involved in i-80 in September of 2024?
So that's a great question. So just for the benefit of the group, I actually wavered in taking the Argonaut job after having gone down to Reno, listened to a tech presentation, and the board meeting was the following day. And I was concerned with what I heard. And I called the lead banker the morning of my appointment to ask him if the gold was there. He said it was. I joke with him now, I should have asked at the grade that was in the tech report. I failed to ask that question. I think, so there was clearly, so the geology in Northern Ontario, similar to West Africa and West Australia, is more challenging than Nevada, number one. And number two, what I didn't realize at the time that I took that job at Argonaut, they were developing a property in Northern Ontario. And I said to the team, come on over. This is going to be easy compared to West Africa. I mean, I can drive to the mine.
For those that don't know, Argonaut specialized in very low-grade mines in Mexico, and what they were trying to do in Canada was very different, correct?
That is correct, yes. Moving from heap leach to a large-scale mill and a different type of geology. Trey, good point. But, the geology was difficult, and it was hard to get people. And, if you can't get people, it's hard to execute. And so, I think that, and we came in very late when the project had moved from $500 million to $1 billion, and we were just trying to get it completed, get ore through the mill. But I think part of the problem, there were several issues with respect to that build, but when that was sold to Alamos, it was put in much stronger hands, and they've done a great job and will do a great job with that property.
And again, as a footnote, Alamos owns and operates sort of the other half of that deposit, correct?
That's correct. And the surface deposit crosses the boundary with Alamos, and the underground do as well. So ultimately, Alamos, which is a great operator, is going to do an incredible job for Argonaut shareholders. But it's a challenge, but you compare that. So I went down before I took the job. We went through the geology. I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with that. And while I'm an accountant, I do know the questions to ask, particularly now after what happened at Argonaut. And everything the team said at the time has carried through. So, we put out 5 PAs in the first quarter of this year. And we indicated at the time that we thought that as we complete the feasibility studies, which will include infill drill programs to convert resources to reserves, we expected the numbers to be better. We've completed the infill drill program for one of the 2 underground mines, one of 3 underground mines, and we're seeing, a material uptick as we complete that conversion program. We're currently wrapping up an infill drill program for the second of the underground mine, and we're seeing the same thing. And we do expect that to continue through the next 12 to 18 months as we complete the infill programs throughout the portfolio.
So again, not to interrupt you, but you just skipped to the present and taking this one step at a time. In terms of i-80 and you're joining the company, I was going to start here. Rick Rule taught me half of what I know about interviewing in this business, and his favorite question or suggestion to investors as a question when they're meeting a new company is to ask, what is the corporate mission? Sort of a funky concept, but when you look at i-80 as Wealthion viewers start to look at your company, what would you identify as your corporate mission?
So our mission is to create value for all of our stakeholders. So, not just shareholders, but our communities, our employees, and the regular, like the government, paying lots of taxes and really being viewed as a solid company and business and partner with all the various groups in the communities and states that we work in. And so that was always Peter Monk at Barrick. That's what he sought to do. At his AGM, he always talked about how much money they're making, the taxes that they were paying, and the kids that they were providing scholarships to and what they did in their communities. So I think that mining is unique in that we can create so much value for all of our stakeholders. Trey, we're not in the big cities. We're in these rural communities, and we can make differences in these places. Not everyone wants to live in a big city, and providing high-paying jobs, improving on the education system, the infrastructure, the medical facilities in these communities, allowing people to work in their local communities and having high-paying, well-respecting jobs makes a difference. And the taxes you pay locally, regionally, state and federally, and just being a contributor to society is important, as well as really creating value for our shareholders, is what our mission is. And, our strategy is to create a mid-tier Nevada-focused gold producer. And so we believe through, early 2030s, we've got a 3-phase development plan that will take production from less than 50,000 ounces per year this year to 200,000 ounces in 28, roughly 400,000 ounces by the end of 29, and then over 600,000 ounces by early 2030s. And while that's a significant growth profile, what I would say is what makes us unique beyond that is that we believe that we can maintain that 600,000 ounce production profile through at least 2050 as we look at this asset base. And that's without doing much of anything other than bringing these assets back into production and executing on the infill drill programs that we've laid out.
So backing up just a teeny bit, trying to keep my train of thought here, could you give us just a couple of sentences on how the i-80 assets were assembled? What brought them all into this company?
So great question. Some of the assets came out of a spin out of Premier Gold when it was sold to Equinox. And then through the course of 2021, the original CEO and founder, Ewan, acquired these assets. So we have 4 past producing gold mines that have produced, probably between 5 and 10 million ounces in the past that were collected. And so, our development plan is really on the back of some very good exploration results after these assets were acquired in 2021, is essentially to redevelop them. And
is that due to the higher gold price or something else?
It's a bit of that, but it's a bit of, so for example, Granite Creek Underground, our first operating mine, we discovered a new zone. It's within 10 kilometers of Turquoise Ridge, and it seemed to be behaving as Turquoise Ridge did when it was originally Getchell, if you recall. And so, I think the team had a theory that as it got to depth, potentially you could see some of the things that Turquoise Ridge replicate, and we're seeing that. They discovered the South Pacific Zone. We're currently conducting an infill drill program of that zone as we speak. And there are 3 differences from the upper zone. The first being better grade, second being better ground conditions, and third, more lateral extent, meaning that we can mine at a higher rate and produce more per level, which is very important.
So what Richard is describing now is i-80's operating asset, which is the underground mine at Granite Creek. And you mentioned a word that I wanted to bring up because I think it's very important in differentiating i-80 assets from the rest of the pack, and that is grade. Can you talk a bit about Granite Creek's grade and how that is unique?
Yeah, all 3 underground mines are high grade. Granite Creek, look, in November, the average grade that we sent for toll milling was 13.75 grams. We see, it's roughly a 10-gram ore body, and we are seeing, that continue at depth, and we're seeing areas of higher grade than the 10-gram. Cove, a second underground mine, the average grade is about 10 grams processed. And then the third, Archimedes, is more of a bulk tonnage, and the grade will be between 7 and 8 grams. So all 3, to your point, Trey, are very high grade.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hate to compare you to everyone, but you just don't hear those grades much anymore. I mean, I get a kick out of all the porphyry deposits that we hear about all the time that are, half a gram, and you can multiply it by a gazillion tons, but it's just a totally different picture. And I think that's very important to understand the uniqueness of the i-80 assets. You've done a good job introducing Granite Creek. What will I can go 2 ways with this. Should we talk about the development projects first, or should you tell me what the signposts on Granite Creek are?
Look, why don't we talk about Granite Creek and we can move into the others.
Okay.
So phase 1 of our development plan is ramping up Granite Creek underground, which has been ramping up for several years. And then we'll develop a second underground mine and refurbish our autoclave. We're one of 2 companies in the state with autoclave. So Granite Creek, as we've talked, is a very high grade operation, but the prior management group had not anticipated water. And then when they were confronted with water, they were caught on their back heels. And so we've had to complete a hydrogeologic model to understand the water impact. And then we've got to build the infrastructure from underground to surface. And then we've got to build the infrastructure to remove that water from the aquifer. And so the hydrogeologic model was completed at the end of the first quarter. We completed in the month of August the permanent infrastructure to remove it from underground. And since we've done that, we're seeing mining rates improve, costs come down. But the third element is removing the water from our actual mine site and putting it in an adjacent aquifer. And to do that, it's got to be a potable drinking standard. So we need a water treatment facility. We're currently permitting, we've ordered it, and we would expect to have that facility in place and operating by the end of the first quarter next year. And that will allow us then to go back and catch up on our development. And that will take largely through the balance of the year. We'll have a feasibility study for Granite Creek out at the end of the first quarter. And look, we believe that it will show a larger reserve and resource base than what was in the technical report we filed in the first quarter. And we're just beginning. There is a lot more work to be done at Granite Creek on the exploration front. And we do think that it's going to continue to get bigger.
One of the concerns, ironically, of i-80 in the past several years has been the unique criticism that you have an embarrassment of riches, meaning you have these 4 development projects, all of which would be valuable to someone, but you've got them all under one roof. And so the challenge, I think, is fairly well known, is how to deal with this embarrassment of riches in terms of the order of development, et cetera. Can you just give us a few sentences on each of the 4 major development projects and how they fit into the long-term plan?
Okay. So we actually have 6 gold projects.